At this point in the anime season for fall 2023, we're about a month in. So I want to talk about the shows that I'm watching and maybe shows that you'll like. And if you're considering shows, I'm going to go through quite a few here. This is probably the most I've ever watched in a season because obviously this is just a hobby for me, so I don't have unlimited time to watch all of it, which would be nice. I won't give any spoilers. I'll probably describe the first season vaguely if it's a sequel season, just so you know what the concept is. And then I'll go into what to expect for the second or third season or whatever. So at that point, if you haven't seen the first season, it will be spoilers. And I'm mainly going to talk about the characters and tone and things like that. So just a quick overview. I'm going to put timestamps for all the shows that I talk about in this video. So my list consists of Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, The Reign of Seven Spellblades, which is only like 3 episodes because they had a weird episode count, Frieren Beyond Journey's End, which is going to be 28 episodes, Shangri La Frontier, which is going to be 25, Berserk of Gluttony, which is going to be 12, Shy, which is going to be 24. I'm giving the Disgraced Noble Lady I Rescued a Crash Course in Naughtiness is going to be 12 episodes. Rising of the Shield Hero Season 3 will be 12 episodes again, just like Season 2. Goblin Slayer, 12 episodes for Season 2. Our Dating Story, The Experienced You and Inexperienced Me, will be 12 episodes. The Kingdoms of Ruin will be 12. Spy Family, Season 2 will be 12. The 100 Girlfriends Who Really Love You will be 12. Dead Mount Deathplay for its second core will be 12. Dr. Stone New World for its second core will be 11. Ragna Crimson will be 24. The Eminence and Shadow will be 12. Tokyo Revengers will be 13. And Attack on Titan Season 4 Part 4, it actually is the finale this time, is going to be an 85-minute movie. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in this one. I'm going to divide the list up into shows where I've actually read the source material ahead of the anime. And then I'm going to go through the ones where I've only watched the episodes that are out so far this season. So for Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, we're about 14 episodes in right now when I'm recording, so there's 9 left. And this has been a pretty crazy season, and to me, this season is going to be the best one. If you haven't seen Season 1 at all, the general plot is it's a world where curses that are invisible to humans but attack them exist, and Jujutsu sorcerers fight them. Itadori Yuji accidentally eats one of the 20 fingers of Sukuna, who is possibly the strongest curse ever, and his 20 fingers were strong enough to where they couldn't be destroyed. So he's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to where he can eat the fingers because he doesn't die. And then when he dies, the fingers will go with him. So Sukuna can never be revived. That's the general premise. There's obviously a lot more to it. Overall, the action scenes are awesome. There's some pretty funny stuff, and it's got plenty of good characters. And this is definitely a show that isn't afraid of killing off people that you like, which I think is a good thing because it makes the show pretty intense. So for Season 2, the Shibuya incident is a bulk of Season 2. And for me, this is the best arc in the manga. If you've been watching so far, you've probably really enjoyed this season. And I actually think the rest of the season is going to be crazier than the first part. So I won't give any details, obviously, but you should be pretty excited. And there's a pretty good spot for this season to end, I think around chapter 160, where the incident wraps up, and then there's a cliffhanger. Because I'm assuming this series is so popular, I can't imagine it doesn't get a Season 3. But what I will say is if it does get a Season 3, there's a handful of chapters after this incident that I like. And then we get to the culling arc, and the culling arc, I just got lost because there was so much going on. I might have to reread it because I was reading week to week, which sometimes can be, difficult when an arc is 30 or 40 chapters. You're talking about a year in our time. The last 25, 30 chapters have been pretty good again. So I'm hoping it ends strong, assuming we're nearing the end. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of promise for this season. You've already seen a lot of it. And I would definitely recommend keeping up with Season 2 because this is the best part. And if you're on the internet, you're probably going to see spoilers. Unfortunately, that's just kind of how it is. The next one that I want to talk about is The Reign of the Seven Spellblades, which actually only has 2 or 3 episodes this season because it had a 15 episode count for some reason. But this is one that I definitely want to read the light novels when I can get to them, hopefully soon here. But the season's finished and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good Season 1 and I would definitely check it out. I would say if by episode 6 you're not invested, it probably just isn't for you. It's kind of like an anime Harry Potter, but I think darker. The first 5-ish episodes, we get introduced to the main characters, the school, which is the Kimberly Magic School of this world. And they also use these swords called athames to fight with sword arts. The Spellblades are secret techniques that they use in close quarters combat, but no one knows who has the 6 Spellblades that exist. And even when people are asked, they keep it to themselves because it's a really powerful thing and they might get attacked. And just to give you an idea about tone, when they're doing the introduction to the school, they refer to the people who go crazy from magic as being consumed by the spell. And they say that about 20 kids who show up to the school won't make it to graduation, and that the instructors aren't going to go out of their way to save them. So it's pretty cutthroat. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happens, and I would definitely check it out. I really enjoyed it. The Rising of the Shield Heroes Season 3 is one of my favorite light novel series, and if you haven't seen it, Season 1, as far as the anime goes, is definitely the best. As far as the books, I actually think we're getting into the best stuff right now, but the anime definitely has to cut corners because of how much they're trying to fit into the show. In the first season, they cover 5 books in 25 episodes, and Season 2 covered 4 books, and Season 3, they look to be on the same pace, so they cut a ton of stuff out to fit more of the story in, which I'm not a huge fan of, obviously. If you haven't seen it before, the general premise is Naofumi Iwatani is transported to another world as one of the 4 cardinal heroes, which is the shield hero, obviously. And the shield, everyone thinks is the lamest one because he can't attack anything. And the other 3 are the spear, bow, and sword. And it definitely is more serious than most isekai, I would say, but it's not super heavy overall. It's not like Overlord or something that gets pretty dark. But if you've seen the first 2 seasons, Season 3 definitely has some of the best stuff book-wise. And this is where we finally see what's going on with the other heroes and get introduced to more of the world and some new characters. I don't want to say too much, but if you like the anime at all, definitely read the light novels. The anime tones down Naofumi being a bit more anti-hero-ish. I wouldn't even say he's necessarily an anti-hero. He just does stuff that they wouldn't do in most isekai. And also the books just really skip out on the world building and the character stuff, especially for the side characters, which I think is part of what makes the series so good. And I do a book verse show for each episode of Season 2 and 3, so you can check those out if you want to see like specifics on what you're missing. This season is really focusing on kind of getting the other heroes to come back to normalcy, because they've been kind of crazy the whole time, obviously. Goblin Slayer Season 2, if you haven't seen it, Goblin Slayer is dark fantasy. If you've seen episode 1 of Season 1, you know that. You pretty much know what you're in for. It's a man called Goblin Slayer who's a silver ranked adventurer, which is the 3rd highest rank in this world, and he gets there by only killing goblins. It's pretty straightforward. You never see his face. He's in a party with Priestess, Lizard Priest, High Elf Archer, and Dwarf Shaman. Everyone is named kind of like if you were playing D&D, and they refer to the roll of the dice a lot and the 4 corners of the world and that sort of stuff. And they go around to different environments, killing goblins in a bunch of different ways. And then every once in a while, you'll get some kind of other monster mixed in that isn't a goblin. If you've seen Season 1, your feelings on the show aren't going to change. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. This is a bit of a weird series because I actually stopped reading the books around 13. I just got kind of tired of it because it is what it is. He opens up a little bit here and there, like he has if you've watched the beginning of the 2nd season, where he kind of starts to. But the premise, I mean, he is who he is. He's not changing. And I thought he was going to go on different adventures and kind of branch out a little bit with other goals, but he never really does. Like, it's very clear that he's going to stay who he is, and the characters are who they are. This is also a weird one because it's hard for me to even tell which books will take place this season. Obviously, most series go in order. Season 1 was book 1 and 2, except reordered. The movie was book 5. Season 2 started off as book 6. If it continues with book 7, there'll be some fan service, so I'm sure people will be happy about that. And you'll get to see more of High Elf Archer's background. But without knowing the order of the series or what it's going to do, there's not really too much to say. This is one definitely either take it or leave it. Our dating story, The Experienced You and Inexperienced Me. This is actually one that I did its own standalone video on maybe a month and a half ago, if you want to go watch that. But I'm going to summarize pretty much the same thing here anyway. It's about Runa Shirakawa and Ryuto Kashima. Runa is a Gyaru type super popular girl who's dated guys kind of consistently for 2 or 3 months at a time and has sex with them. And Ryuto is a nerdy loser, and he confesses to her on a bet from his friends. She says, okay, let's go out, and offers to have sex with him. And he says no, because she explains that she thinks sex is just like a girlfriend duty. It doesn't seem like she actually enjoyed it. So he tells her that he doesn't want to do that until she actually wants to. So the story is actually really wholesome, and it's about them trying to get to know each other better and grow closer. And there's a little bit of drama mixed in, a little bit of comedy. For me, it's a definite recommend. I read all the light novels, even though they're machine translations right now. The official novels are coming out soon, which is nice. And if you watch the first 4 episodes, you can kind of see what the show is. Like, the tone is what it is. They're developing their feelings for each other. There's some nice cutesy moments, a little bit of drama. And then their friends kind of function as side characters, and you get to know them better along the way also. Spy Family Season 2. This is my wife's favorite show and one of my favorites. If you haven't seen it, the premise is that a spy, Lloyd Forger, needs a fake family for a mission in a Cold War-like fictional world, and he adopts a girl, Anya, who's a telepath, and the fake wife that he ends up with is Yor, who is an assassin and wants the fake marriage to not seem suspicious, because obviously single women are seen as suspicious in these types of governments. It's a really funny, just really wholesome and overall cute show that I think pretty much anybody can enjoy. If you're caught up on season 1, season 2 has the same style, but I think the rest of the season is going to be one big arc, which is called the Cruise arc. And if you're a Yor fan, this one's definitely for you. The whole family has plenty of screen time, but Yor is definitely the centerpiece for this one, because we get to see more of her assassin side, which we don't usually get to see. And that's a criticism that I saw some people had from the first season, that we don't see enough of it. So if you're into Yor, which I think everybody on the internet is, the Cruise arc is all about her. And we get some really good character stuff from her this season, and some pretty funny stuff from Lloyd and Anya too. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it animated. Deadmount Death Play, Second Core. This is one that I feel like has kind of slipped under the radar a bit. It's a reverse isekai about a necromancer called the Corpse God, who was fighting the hero of his world, and he transferred his soul to another world, Earth, to escape from the hero. It's a good balance of dark humor and actual dark stuff happening. Obviously, the main guy is a necromancer who's taken over someone else's body, because his name is the Corpse God. And I would definitely recommend checking out at least the first 2 or 3 episodes to see if you'll like it. It does a pretty good job of having dark humor without the humor undercutting the serious stuff. If you saw the first core, the second core picks up right where it left off, and everything is pretty much on a collision course for the Corpse God in Shinjuku. And we get introduced to some more crazy characters, and I don't think we're going to finish the first big arc, but there's a pretty good spot to stop in, I think. And that's probably where the show will leave off, where this first initial arc kind of wraps up, but there's plenty of stuff open if they want to continue. And you've already seen how there's some connections between the Corpse God's world and Earth. And I think more of that is going to get explained as the season goes on. But with anime, you never know if they're going to rearrange it to where that doesn't get explained until later. But I think you will start to see some of the tie-ins between the two worlds. And overall, it's just a really fun show that I think most people would like. I don't know if I would say it's for kids or anything, but you know, if you're into the style of humor and pretty good action, kind of like the fantasy elements taking place on Earth is neat. There's a bunch of eccentric characters with sort of superhuman, inexplicable abilities running around. You got stuff with the police and dirty cops and all that. So there's a lot going on. And I think there's something for everybody. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how this one goes too. I've been really enjoying the manga. I'm caught up on it. So maybe give that a shot if you really like it. Dr. Stone, Season 3, Core 2, or Dr. Stone New World, Core 2. Dr. Stone is a show where the entire Earth gets petrified and Senku wakes up 3,600 years later. It's a pretty interesting show because it's all about science and how to create and essentially recreate society from caveman status. I don't know how accurate the science really is, but it seems like they must use consultants or something because a lot goes into it. So it at least seems legitimate whether it actually is or not. And what you're watching is Senku and the other people that wake up and that he wakes up recreate civilization because they already have the knowledge. It's a matter of gathering the resources. And the reason they have the knowledge is because he's supposed to be a genius who just knows a ton about science. It has some pretty good comedy and some good action, and it's just interesting overall. And also Senku has one of the best stupid faces in anime. As far as where the story is now, they're in the exploration phase of the world, and we're in the petrification side versus the science side. And this will pretty much be the rest of the second core, obviously. And I really like this part of the story because you start finding out about the petrification itself. This manga is done. And for me, this manga is really good for the first like 90%. And I just wasn't a huge fan of the end. I've seen people say that they liked it. It just didn't really work for me. Overall, I would definitely recommend it. This is another one that if you don't like it after the first 3-4 episodes, it's probably just not for you. But I think it's a pretty funny show, and it's a pretty interesting show, especially as far as all the stuff that they talk about going into the science on. So yeah, I mean, if you watch the first core and you're kind of iffy about the second one, I would keep going. Because I do think the show just gets pretty much better and better all the way up until right at the end for me. which I guess is kind of a typical anime thing, but The Eminence in Shadow, this is season 2, which will be shorter than season 1. Season 1 was 20 episodes. This one is one of the toughest ones for me because the premise is satire of your sort of stereotypical overpowered edgelord isekai show. The idea is that Sid Kagano was trying to be a hero in real life, and he kind of goes crazy until he meets Truck-kun, and then he's reincarnated in another world where he becomes the strongest, but he wants to do it all in secret and become the Shadow, like a kind of Batman ripoff. He's edgy, whatever. Chunibyo, I think is what they call him. The reason that I struggle with this one is because some of the satire is really funny. Like in this image here, you can see he's trying to be a background character, is like his normal persona, and he does everything to be normal and go unnoticed. Then when he becomes Shadow, and he's the leader of Shadow Garden, he's fighting crime and villains and that sort of thing, and unraveling conspiracies and all that type of stuff. And for me, this show is like just fine, but it seems like people really love it. And the reason for me it's just fine is because the satire stuff is really good, but then the fighting stuff is mostly taken pretty seriously. Like they do the epic music and he's fighting these really powerful villains and he's got these super powered moves with names and all that stuff. Like I would say this is another one by if episode 2 or 3 you're not into it, it's just not for you. Because that's kind of how I feel, even though I ended up reading all the manga to try to see like, am I just not getting it? I'm going to give a couple examples for this one. So there'll be minor spoilers for this one, just as a heads up. But before I do, this is another one where I'd say if you like season 1, based on the manga, season 2 you'll like. So the examples I want to give, there's one where his friends dare him to ask out a princess at his school who rejects everybody. And he does like the stereotypical nerd rom-com thing you can see here, where he's like stuttering and embarrassed and whatever. And he asks her out and she says yes, which is all funny. And then she ends up being a total dick. And they're both kind of dicks to each other, which is it's all pretty amusing. But then it turns around later on, and I'm just speculating because I don't know for sure, where it seems like she's going to fall in love with him, which is like a typical rom-com trope too. You have a couple who gets together as part of a deal and then falls in love. Like this is a rom-com thing that happens all the time. So like on one hand, it's making fun of it, but then on the other hand, it actually goes and does it. So that's what I mean when I have a hard time with it, because when it's making fun of it, it's great. But then when you actually do the thing, it's like, well, you're making fun of it, but you're doing it. And another example that I have is the dueling tournament in season 1. He goes undercover as a average looking mediocre guy, and he's winning, but trying to make it look unimpressive. I mean, he calls himself Mundane Man. And at one point, he dodges a strike by cracking his neck, and then he wins when he sneezes. And this is great satire, because one of the most powerful people in the city sees what he's doing because it happens super fast. So she starts doing like the neck cracking and sneezing thing too. And obviously this is all funny because you get these ridiculous moves sometimes in anime, or these weird ways where they power up or whatever. Like that's really good. But there's also a fight where the action and plot are like super serious and the music is really orchestral and big. And he goes, I am atomic. And then he blows up the whole city. And this, at least from what I've seen by the fans online, is seen as like actually cool and awesome. Not like, oh, it's so over the top, it's funny type thing. So for me, the show kind of seems like it wants the benefit of the doubt of being satirical. But then if it actually does something that's making fun of, and you were to say, oh, that's kind of lame, it has the defense of saying, oh, well, it's satire, even though it's actually doing the thing. And like, so just a little bit more on this. Like he has a harem, and there's a decent amount of fan service, and the princesses are falling in love with him. And it does like all the standard tropes. For me, a much better version of this, which I know is just straight comedy, is Konosuba. Because Konosuba, Kazuma is really weak and a scumbag, and then all of his teammates have these really dysfunctional powers. So they're like kind of useless. So they're really powerful in a specific way, but then kind of useless. But when they fight the bosses or the Demon King's generals or whatever, they win. But they do it in these ridiculous ways and super underhanded. And I think this works for making fun of isekai for me, because it's making fun of it the whole time. The tone is really consistent. And that show also does have some serious and like nice moments between him and some of the girls and that sort of thing. And they're done well, but they stay in character. So for me, this is like kind of a complicated one. I rambled way too long. This is one where I'm not even sure what to say. It seems really popular, so you'll probably like it. Go check it out. You'll have to decide on your own if it works for you or not. The next one I want to talk about is Shangri La Frontier. And I actually just read this manga over the last like 3 or 4 days. And this is one that is just a lot of fun. This scene that I'm showing right now is about 1 minute into the first episode. And there's been a few times in anime where something just caught me so off guard that I busted out laughing for like 30 seconds. And this one got me. So the premise is the main guy likes really shitty games because they're really challenging and he's like a weirdo. And Shangri La Frontier is supposed to be like this mainstream god tier game. And he's encouraged by a store clerk to try to play a good game for once because the store clerk knows a girl from his class who plays the game who has a crush on him. So she's trying to help the girl out. So this guy gives the game a shot and he just looks insane with this blue bird head and these trunks that he wears. And it's a lot of him playing in the game and kind of shenanigans. But it's one of the few shows that I feel like gets like gaming culture actually right. Like, you know, when you watch a commercial that you can tell was written by some boomer where the kids are like stabbing the controller and they're like, oh, on your left, got him, bro, and all shit like that. This one, I feel like the person who wrote it actually plays games and understands like the mentality and how they talk shit and stuff. Like as the manga goes on, especially, you get to see more of it. So it's been pretty fun. The girl who's I'm assuming going to be romance interest, I don't know, does come into play, but the romance at least seems like it's going to be a very slow build up burn type thing. So that's kind of where it's at right now. This is one that it's pretty chill and it's just pretty fun. And if you're into video games, these are all virtual reality video games. So that's where most of the show takes place. But you know, he complains about some of the boss gimmicks and that kind of stuff. All stuff that if you played enough video games, you can totally relate to. So definitely one of the ones that I think is the most easy to watch this season. Tokyo Revengers Season 3 is out on Hulu, at least in America. And this is the show that I really like, but I've also seen people say they really hate it. And I think they hate it because of the main character. I'll talk about that in just a second. But if you haven't seen it, the premise is that Takemichi Hanagaki is in his 20s. I think he's 26 when it starts. And he's at this bullshit job and he's just kind of a loser and people push him around and all that kind of stuff. And he's watching the news in his shitty apartment and he sees that his only girlfriend, who was in middle school, Hinata Tachibana, died in an incident related to the Tokyo Manji gang, which he was a part of in middle school. The next day, he gets shoved onto a train track, and instead of dying, he goes back 12 years to when he was in the gang and in a relationship with Hinata. And what you find out is that there's a certain trigger that lets him go back and forth 12 years exactly. So he only gets one do-over. So he can jump back, change things, and then jump to the future and see if the future was affected or not. But then when he goes back again, he's going back on the same date, just 12 years prior. So he keeps jumping back and forth to try to fix the future and save Hinata. So the reason people dislike it, like I was saying, I think is because he's in a gang and gets into a lot of gang fights, and he's just perpetually getting his ass whipped. And he cries a fair amount. I actually think they call him the crybaby hero at one point. So I personally like it because it's nice to see a guy who just kind of sucks but keeps going. And he's not just out there whipping everybody's ass and, you know, that whole thing. So I don't want to say too much more plot-wise, but as far as Season 3, you know, if you like Season 1 and 2, it just continues on. I believe in this one we'll get more of a look into Mikey's background based on the manga. And overall, this is a series for me that I really liked up until a certain point, about 2/3 of the way through or 75% of the way through. And then there was a decision that was made that I just really hated. And I won't say what it was because there's no way for me to say what it was without ruining the entire story. So that's just kind of how I felt about it. But yeah, this is one that if you like it, you like it. Not much changes. You get more in depth with each character. New gangs come around, you know, so on, so on. As far as big plot stuff, my guess would be Season 4. There's a pretty big plot thing. And there's plot stuff in all of them, but one that I was really looking forward to happens. I think it'll be Season 4 if it comes out. Attack on Titan, Season 4, Part 4, whatever. The final movie. And this is an anime that, if you watch anime, I assume you know what it is. So I'm not going to say too much about it. Just go fucking watch it. As far as the last movie goes, the trailer looked awesome. And I expected it to be pretty much non-stop action. I liked the ending. I read it as soon as it was translated to English. I think the hate gets kind of overblown. You know, I don't want to say anything spoilery, but after episode 2, I asked my wife, do you think that this thing and this thing will happen? And they did. Obviously, I was being very broad because at the time we didn't have any details for the story. But, you know, to me, the character motivations were very clear from the beginning. And the ending was, roughly speaking, what I expected pretty early on. So I'm looking forward to everybody getting to see it and hope you enjoy it. Now I'm getting to the shows where I've only seen the anime and I haven't read the manga. And the first one's going to be the 100 girlfriends that really, 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 really love you. And the image that you're looking at is the god in this story. And this is the first season. It's a pretty funny harem rom-com. I'm not normally into harems, but the way that this one is done I find really amusing. You find out in the first episode that the main character has had 100 confessions rejected in middle school and given up on love. So he goes to a shrine and God tells him that soulmates are important because you only get one in life. And if you don't get into a relationship with that soulmate, you'll lose your purpose and die. So this kid has 2 girls confess to him, so he goes to talk to God about it, and God says that he made a mistake and actually gave the main character 100 soulmates instead of 1. And the way that it works is when they see each other, there's like a physical spark in their brain. It's not like, oh, I just like you and we get along and we're soulmates. So obviously he has to decide what to do, and his solution is to be with all 100 soulmates so they don't die. So it's pretty funny. It's got some good fourth wall breaking humor, and the premise is just so crazy that I think that's kind of what makes it work for me. And as always, after an episode or 2, if it's not for you, it's just not for you. This is another one that once you get into it, it's pretty steady with the formula. The next one I'm going to go to is Frieren Beyond Journey's End. This one started off with a 4-episode special, which I'm assuming was like an hour-and-a-half special in Japan. But either way, it's like 8 episodes in. And the premise is that this elf, Frieren, her and her adventuring party defeated the Demon King and they're returning to normal life. And she says, I'll see you guys later, like it's no big deal. And she returns 50 years later to see this meteor shower that they just saw because she doesn't think it's a long time. And then her one companion is dying because he's human. And this happens twice in the first 4 episodes because 2 of her party members were humans. And one of the companions asks her to take care of a child named Fern and teach her magic. So Fern and Frieren are a 2-team adventuring party, and they're just kind of wandering, and because in this world you can research magic and develop magic kind of like science. And the main crux of the story is that Frieren wants to get to know humans better and really learn to value her time with them, because to her their lives are over so fast that it's kind of nothing. And I'm not really even sure what to say about this one after the first few episodes, because the first 4-episode thing is pretty sad and kind of philosophical. But then after that, it's kind of like a slice of life fantasy with some action. And there's been a decent amount of action, but I wouldn't say it ever feels like super intense or anything. So it's kind of hard to describe. And the goal of her and Fern is to go to heaven, which is an actual location in this world, and talk to the souls of the people they lost. And this is one that I think some people would just like to have on in the background because it's kind of chill and like boring. And then maybe some people would just love it. I've enjoyed it, but I wouldn't say it's stellar. It's one of those that like I'm fine to keep watching, but it's not like a deal breaker or I'm setting aside time every week or anything, which I know is not helpful for recommendation, but so much of what you enjoy is subjective, unfortunately. Even if you think you can be objective about quality itself, what you actually like is its own thing. So the next one that I want to talk about is Berserk of Gluttony. And this one I've really liked, and I definitely would add this to the end of my reading list. The general premise is pretty cool. It's a fantasy world with monsters and stuff, and people have powers and abilities, and the main character thinks that he has a useless ability called gluttony, because all it does is make him hungry. And society treats people with useful abilities as royalty, like this girl on the left you can see as royalty. And then it's a kind of a class-based society, at least for this part of it. So he's a loser, and he gets bullied and treated like crap by a lot of the royalty, until one night he helps out this chick who's nice to him, and she's on guard duty, and they're on good terms, and there's a robber, so she goes to chase him, and the robber gets to him, and he accidentally kills him. And this powers up his ability called gluttony, and when he's really hungry in the streets, the next day he's looking for a sword, and he finds a quote-unquote useless sword that's super cheap, that he can actually afford, and it talks to him, called greed. And the reason greed seems cheap is because it hasn't been powered up. So Greed explains to the main guy that he has to kill monsters or whatever to satiate his gluttony, or he'll go crazy now that it's been activated. But as time goes on, he has to kill more and more things and more powerful things to satisfy it. And then Greed, which is his sword, steals his stats to upgrade. So he can choose when he does that, because they have like stats in their vision. So he can sacrifice his stats to Greed to power Greed up, and then he has to kill monsters to power himself up. So I think concept-wise, it's really cool, and I'm definitely looking forward to where it goes. So far, it hasn't been super dark or anything. It's definitely serious, but I wouldn't say it's like heavy. It's just action, and there's a little bit of comedy and a little bit of serious stuff. It's a good balance for fantasy. For me, this has been probably one of the most interesting ones of the season. as far as original stuff goes. Another one that I've been watching is called Shy. And this is a pretty interesting concept too, because I can't tell if it's going to end up being kind of generic or pretty good. I think it's going to be pretty good though. The premise is that there was going to be World War III, but then superheroes showed up to Earth to prevent it. So each hero lives in a different country to protect its citizens and live amongst them like normal. And Shy is super introverted and awkward. Her name I can't pronounce. It's like Miyagi Yamaka or something. And her ability is super strength. And the opener is that she saves these people on a roller coaster, but one of them hurts her leg and she feels really guilty over it because she's a high school girl and she's super awkward and introverted. Like the type of person who can't talk to a cashier, introvert type, like very socially anxious. I like the idea of someone this awkward trying to be a hero, because heroes are usually these very bold kind of symbols of justice for society. And there's been some good moments so far. A couple pretty nice moments in the last episode especially, but it's hard to spoil too much without getting really into kind of what the general plot is. I think we've met the main villain for the series, and there's some other stuff going on, so it seems like it'll be pretty interesting. The most recent episodes have gotten increasingly better, so that's a positive, which is episode 4 and 5 as of this recording. And if you're into superhero stuff, it seems different enough to be original, but still in the superhero vein. So I'm not sure how I would describe it, but another one, I'd at least give it a shot. This is one that I think most people would probably enjoy. So the next one is I'm giving the disgraced noble lady I rescued a crash course in naughtiness. And this is a pretty misleading title if you think there's going to be a ton of fan service and stuff. This noblewoman that you can see on the screen was engaged to a corrupt prince who ran her out of the country and tried to get her executed. But she escaped into the woods where a sorcerer known as the Dark Lord lives in isolation. And he decides to save her because he decides because she was treated so poorly and pretty much as a servant, even though she was supposed to be royalty, that he's going to teach her how to enjoy the naughty things in life because she's very straight-laced. And for example, just so you know what they mean by naughty, it's been things like shopping for herself or eating desserts or staying up late. So it's pretty wholesome. I would say it's pretty much a mix of slice of life and rom-com. Wikipedia has it listed as fantasy and slice of life, which, fine. Me saying it's a rom-com isn't a spoiler. It's just where I'm assuming the story's going to go. I haven't read anything, so I don't know. And they introduce amusing side characters and that whole deal. This is another one that I think is pretty chill. It's not going to change your life, but if you want something kind of happy and wholesome and nice, this is a good show. The Kingdoms of Ruin is the next one I want to talk about, and this one is the most undecided I am. The show has a cool revenge premise, but I don't know if I'll stick with it or not. The premise is that a witch raised a human in a world where witches were feared and hated, but they were nice to humans to try to keep things civilized. So she raised him with the ability to use this special type of writing magic, and they get arrested together, and the new leader performs a public execution on her where the humans have developed science enough to shut off the witch's magic, so they're just women. And the goal is to exterminate all of them. So obviously the first episode's pretty rough and the premise is pretty good, but then every episode since has just been kind of miserable to watch. I like revenge stories, but this story feels like it's just nothing but suffering so far. And those are definitely harder for me to watch. You have to be really in a really specific mood to want to watch a show where it's just a downer all the time. So I wouldn't say don't watch it, but I'm definitely mixed right now. I just don't know. And these will be spoilers that I'm going to talk about just for like 30 seconds, so you can click away if you want. But like the next 2 episodes, he ages up 10 years and goes on like a genocidal rampage. And then this girl that's trying to save him gets killed. It's just a lot is going on. And it's kind of doing the thing where he just seems like such a maniac that I don't know if I want to keep watching and rooting for him. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. And the last one that I want to talk about is Ragna Crimson. This is another one that I'm kind of torn on, but I'm definitely more positive than Kingdoms of Ruin because the concept is really cool. I'm just not totally sure of the direction of the story yet. The first episode was an hour special, and there's been 5 episodes, so about 6 equivalent. It's a world where dragons exist, so there's dragon hunters, and they use silverine weapons to kill them, and that's the only way that humans can fight them. Ragna is unskilled and believes unlucky because the dragons are just drawn to him, but he has to rely on his friend to kill him. I don't want to be spoilery, but something happens, and he ends up becoming really, really strong. Crimson is the name of the #1 dragon monarch, which is the second strongest dragon. And Crimson is in a female body, so I keep wanting to say her, but he can change his sex, even though in the show Crimson is always female. Anyway, with Ragna's newfound strength, Crimson and him form an alliance, hence the show name Ragna Crimson, with a specific goal about killing all the dragons. The reason I wouldn't give this show a hard recommend, I don't know if the story is going to get more specific, or if it's just going to be this crazy dragon hunting and fighting type thing with kind of no real direction. Overall, it has some dark stuff in it, but I've really enjoyed it so far. And I think Crimson is actually the more interesting character, because you kind of don't know what she's up to, the dragon. Because like once you hear their plan, you're like, huh, that's an interesting plan to come from her or him. But I don't know if there's more to it. And she's a little bit dickish, so I'm curious to see where she goes and where they go together. But I hope that there's more story and it's not just mindless fighting. So that one is kind of to be determined. But yeah, this is everything that I'm watching for this season. Hopefully, if you watch this, or if you just listen to the segments, maybe you pick out a show that I recommended. I hope you actually like it. If there's any shows that you guys think that I should definitely check out, feel free to put them in the comments. I also do want to check out Apothecary Diaries, but haven't made it to that yet. So let me know if you guys disagree or agree with my recommendations. That's it from me for this one. See ya. Thanks.